Before we get into the video, quick disclaimer. These are our opinions. You are in the right to agree or disagree. We're not intending to offend. Well, I'm not intending to offend. I don't know if he is. Okay, no. We're not intending to offend. And on that note...
You're not intending to offend. I'm intending to...
Okay. I stand corrected. He is intending to offend. And on that note, this is an opinion, which means it is subject to change. Okay, starting with our first topic. Story. The overarching plot and story of Cagaster, the insect cage. So, to summarize, basically, the anime is about these bug things that are, I don't know what, infecting the entire place, and people can become infected with the bug disease and therefore be turned into bugs. So that's like the overall problem that everybody in the anime has to deal with. And well, we have the characters that have a more in-depth story to go with this and expand.
So, what do you think, the plot?
Okay, well, the plot is just a big wasted potential because in the show, as you and I know because we sat down watching it, they instead, for some reason, choose to focus on, like, a big bad guy, you know? Like, some problem in the background that's causing all the extra issues apart from just the bug disease, which we find out about closer to the end of the episodes. Instead of focusing on the entire world and how the people are dealing with this bug infection, the Cagasters, and other aspects that would either conflict with that problem in of itself or even join with it. So like things of religion, way of life, morality, all those kinds of things are things that personally I thought the creators should have focused on with a problem like people randomly turning into bugs sometimes, or just bugs killing people, you know? Instead of a big bad guy.
I get where you're coming from. Like they teased some aspects of that in certain episodes, like in episode 5 where they showed Kito's backstory, and they sort of teased like this religious aspect, or the aspect that even when people get infected, their family members can still be attached, like things that are understandable, like we want to know more about that, but there are only some glimpses, some scarce glimpses scattered throughout the series and never focused on.
Yeah, I agree. Just like you said, episode 5 was a really good episode because it focused on other elements that, unfortunately, the rest of the show just doesn't.
Yeah, and especially my problem with it was that they sort of went along with the story in the first 3 episodes, and then thought to themselves, shit, we didn't explain like backstory, or we didn't hint on backstory, we gotta put that in now. Instead of like sprinkling it a bit throughout the series, or making the anime longer so they can show the backstory a bit better, put in these entire episodes of backstory at like episode 5 or later, I can't remember which one it was, but showing Elise backstory in the later one, like they don't really have a focus. They tell a story, insert a backstory that is related to that story, but once you get back into the real story, you feel like you've lost the connection you had.
Yeah, exactly. It's strange. They decided to focus on probably the least exciting aspect of the world that they've created. And that may, I don't know, I'm just making assumptions here, I'm not trying to state this as fact, but they may have just been caught up in the tropes of anime. So in most like really big anime, there's always a guy behind the curtain, you know, the big bad guy that they have to go and defeat. And it's not just a world problem. It's not just a state of existence problem. And there's always somebody you have to stop to solve the problem.
Yeah. What, honestly, after episode 5, what I thought to myself was, man, this was really fun to watch. If they just do a full anime about Kido's backstory, like, they could have explored the world around him with, um, paranoia, these religious themes, like the military or certain social aspects, like how are the cities. I mean, we get a look at the cities at like '05 only, but we don't really get a view like how is the community living there, how's society. Would they have focused on like Kido making his way through this wasteland instead of just showing the story with a big bad evil guy? Like they could have done so much more.
And that's also a question I have. Why are the places called things like that '05? Because I think there was an episode way later down where one of the characters was asking like the fat guy, the guy who's basically in charge of '05, and they asked him like what was the name of this place before it was called '05, and I don't think he ever answered that question.
No, we didn't.
I don't think anybody did.
That's a good question because, like, why? It, it seems that the anime itself has some sort of problem or something like that with names. They just thought to themselves, ah, fuck it, no one will care.
Yeah, it's disconnecting for some reason. And even though that was just like a minor detail, I found myself focusing on that closer to the end of the episode. I was like, okay, maybe they're just pushing it off until later on where they'll do like a big reveal. This was the name of it before it was '05, but we decided we didn't want to be attached to whatever was connected with that name, and we decided to make this our own. So we called it '05, which is such a strange name. It sounds like it's part of a regime, like there's a big military that owns everything, and instead of making it feel like a country or a place or a home, they decided to just give us a number.
Yeah, I mean, they could have maybe done something like that you said with the military, but they send so many mixed signals about the military in the anime. Like, in the backstory of Kido in episode 5, they make them out as like so bad, like
Yes.
guys, killing civilians just because they um, stand in front of a Cagaster who's about to turn into an insect,
Yeah.
or like eliminating a bunch of exterminators, like backstabbing them and blowing up the place they're trapped in with explosives because they want to get rid of the exterminators.
Which makes no sense to me.
What?
It makes no
Yeah,
sense to me.
exactly. Why would they like kill people who kill their insects for them?
Exactly. Again, assumptions on my part, but I'm not really sure the creators knew what they wanted to do exactly with the military. I think they had a base idea in that they wanted to convey a bit of a morally gray kind of thing where some of the higher ups are really, really wicked or whatever because they've been in this industry for so long. Industry, I use the word industry, whatever. They've been in this profession for so long.
Yeah.
But throughout the anime, and especially in the first few episodes, it just feels like everybody hates the military, but for no reason. Because it's not like they're walking around with guns anywhere. And the only reason I could think of they would hate them is for that time when they burnt down that section of '05. But that's not really justification enough for almost everybody having a grudge against them.
Yeah, and it's like not the entire military, like it's the '05 military. That's another question I had, like, what's the '05 military? Like, there are 3 or 5 people, like, getting focused on, and then there are a bunch of soldiers, and then there are a bunch of, like, the sultans or the king's guards.
And then what are the exterminators? Like, how do we class them? Because the exterminators are basically doing exactly what the military is doing. Or are we supposed to see the exterminators like bounty hunters or something like that? Is that what they are? Because I could see that being a thing in the context of the show, but it's not really. Or at least to me, it wasn't explained properly.
Yeah, what they should have done is focus a bit more on the exterminator, how all that works. Anime, a lot of good anime tend to do a lot of world building where they are giving you a lot of information, where you're at first thinking, what am I going to do with these? Those are so many informations, and in moments like these, with Cagaster, you finally recognize I need this information to understand the world building. Like the sticky parts that are holding together the card house.
And there's a lot that this anime leaves out in the narrative in of itself. Something that we actually spoke about a little bit in depth after one of the episodes. I can't remember which one, but you had raised a very good question of how do people become infected? And I don't think they ever explain this. Well, maybe I'm wrong because I do remember at some point in the last two episodes they said something about how people just evolve into the bugs, and some people will, some people won't.
They did this thing where they said that certain people are bound to become insects one day, and others just aren't. I feel like this could have been an interesting concept, like especially with what the bad guy wanted to do, the Adhan, where he wanted to create a world where everybody knows who's going to turn into Cagaster. And my idea would have been that you could have shown like what would have happened if that came true, like a world full of segregation, or where people that are bound to turn are like killed before they reach adulthood. But in the context of this anime, it feels like such a cop-out, because you can just say that anybody is going to turn because they're bound to, and that's just so cheap, because you can, like with what they did in episode 4 with the Kasim, the guy from the tank force.
Yeah, I remember Kasim.
Where they put in his backstory, made a tragic scene, and then let him get transformed. And I mean, that's basically explained through what they tell you in the later episodes, but it's such a huge cop-out.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it was in the second episode where they had the paranoid guy. That was so cool. I think the idea of these characters not knowing who's going to turn next should have played a bigger role than just that one guy they had to deal with. Because, I mean, that guy went insane. He killed his entire family with paranoia of them turning into bugs, seeing they were turning and their bodies didn't even look partially turned.
Yeah, as I already said in the beginning, like, they had so many good things and so many good aspects that they could have evolved or could have built on for the rest of the anime, but they just didn't. They just had this lazy ass story where they said there's the big bad evil guy behind the curtains pulling the strings, and yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah. It was sad to see it go down that way. Because I had hope. Yeah. I had hope. So let's discuss our first official edgelord. Keto.
Oh my god. During the first episode, I absolutely despised this guy. He was so unbearable.
He was annoying. His personality was just edge.
Yeah. I mean, episode 5 did develop him, but they also gave him the creepiest scene of the entire anime, where he, like, pushes down this 14-year-old girl on the bed.
I know!
Molests her.
Basically.
She even says that she doesn't want to, and he keeps going, and only after he realizes, oh, I have to ask before I do that, he stops, like,
Oh, I have to ask.
okay.
And then he's like, maybe this is what Miss Mario was talking about when she said you have to get permission. And I'm like, what else was she talking about?
Oh my god, yes, exactly. God damn it.
He was ugh. I'll give credit where it's due. He was passable in like the last 4, 5 episodes. I could live with him being that level of edge, but still the rest of his character, which he actually had more like likable traits. He was a bit teasing and kind of playing around, and you could tell that he's really good at what he does because he can take the time to just joke about. So that was good.
I feel he played off a lot of second edgelord that we'll need to discuss because
We'll get to him, don't worry.
because that guy was even edgier, and especially when he came into contact with him, he was so much more likable.
Yeah. Maybe it's like a lesser of two evils kind of thing, where Kido just wasn't as bad as the other edgelord that we'll get into in a minute. And so he just seemed better by comparison. Because the other guy sucks.
Oh yes. You want to talk about him directly, or do you got any other priorities?
Well, we can get to him, but we have to explain his name. So, next
Yeah.
character, his name is Acht, and you
Yeah.
can tell them what that means in German.
Yeah, I mean it's basically just the number 8, and he has that name because in the number of experiments to create a part human, part Cagaster queen to control like the insects. Yeah, it's bullshit. Don't worry about it. He was like the 8th specimen that they developed, so he's just called number 8 or Arct 8. It's not that important.
It really is. Well, you know, in the context of everything else, probably not. And I want to discuss him a little bit more than just memeing on him. But
Yeah.
for everyone else to know, we've officially dubbed him as what? Edgelord Boy Uwu the Eighth.
Oh god, I love that name. That's
I will refer to him as nothing else. So, Edge Boy. Edgelord.
yeah.
I already messed up his name. Edge Boy.
Oh god. Okay.
Okay, no, but seriously.
His backstory. They did something with him. I just couldn't seem to care, just like I didn't care about Eli, his sister. I mean, they served kind of as a plot device. Acht, however you want to call him or pronounce that shit.
His name is Edge Boy.
Edge Boy, exactly, Edge Boy, my bad. Edge Boy, I feel like they, like with every other good intention they had, they could have built on much more than they did. They were playing like on the idea of rejection, failure, like Ark was treated as a failure from birth on. Like, he was a male, so he couldn't be a queen.
Yeah.
Oh, James Charles would like to differ, but okay.
I know, sisters!
Anywho, so he was treated as a failure, but like Griffith was like Griffith, his foster father, I would call him, the only one like that was treating him right, and he was basically the caretaker of his little sister. From early on, he had to take a lot of responsibilities by also being called a failure. And I feel like if they had done him right, not making him such a damn edgelord, he would have been such a relatable and enjoyable character, just of all that he's been through. Like, there are characters who experience trauma in their past and that aren't so edgy.
Yeah. Edge Boy.
Edge Boy Uwu.
Edge Boy Uwu. I think what turned me off of Edge Boy Uwu, the 8th, so quickly is that his introduction was kind of bad, you know? Before it got to his backstory, he was just that, an edgelord villain person who we knew nothing about. The first time we see him, he's standing in a crowd of people in a hazmat suit, which isn't suspicious for some reason, but okay. And that's the first time we see him. And after that, I think the next time we see him, he's killing some exterminators. And okay, that's fine. I'm not really a picky person, or at least I don't consider myself to be too picky. So this isn't too bad for me. I'm like, okay, we have a character here who's doing stuff. He's got a vendetta against exterminators. Let's see where this goes. But after that, he's just like this arrogant, taunting character when he comes in contact with Kido. And he's not interesting because he's like, oh, you don't get to see my face. Only one person gets to see this face. And his line delivery, I know we're not talking about production right now, but his line delivery was just awful. Coupled with the bad animation. Well, not bad animation. Animation that was very unappealing at this point in time. And the very slow and poor fight choreography. All these things coupled and just made him so He was just Why are you here? I don't care. And then it turns out he's not even the big bad villain at the end anyway. He's got a past and a backstory that we delve into episodes later. Suddenly.
Yeah, he's expanded on so late on, and at that point you just kind of not care anymore. You need a certain amount of time in an anime to start developing feelings, like a relation to a character in the series, because otherwise you're getting these emotions thrown at you, and then it's like, okay, good. It's 2 episodes from the end. What am I supposed to do with that now?
Exactly. This is something that is a big problem for this anime in general. The pacing is awful. Again, I know we're not talking about production right now, but the pacing itself is awful. They've got 12 episodes to work with. And Edgy Boy is introduced in the 3rd episode, I think. Yeah, somewhere around there in the 3rd episode. And then these episodes are almost half an hour long. Not always. Almost. So he's introduced somewhere along in the 3rd episode. That's fine. No problem. But then he actually gets his backstory sometime in the 7th episode, I think. Yes, it's about the 7th episode. And that time period could work if he had gotten some more focus in between from episode 3 to episode 7. But because these episodes themselves aren't very long, like there are only 12 episodes, the priorities needed to be put in the proper places. But in regards to Edgy Boy, Uwu, the 8th, it wasn't. Because he appears in the 3rd episode, nothing happens with him in between then, and then suddenly in the 7th episode, he's got a tragic backstory that we need to feel for him.
And I think that's in the 6th episode, if I'm not remembering it right. Like, we see him in the 3rd episode fighting Kido, if I'm not mistaken. And then in the 6th episode, he's actively helping Kido and Ili out. Like, I mean, I guess he's helping his sister out with that, but, like, I want something to show me that Ark is ready to step beyond his hate for exterminators to actually help one, even if it's for the sake of his sister. If your sister was in a life-threatening situation and you couldn't help her, and she was with this guy that you despise and would love to kill, you wouldn't just give this guy a card or anything for that matter and leave him alone with your sister.
Yeah, exactly. A person that we didn't even know he was really related to yet. And just want to say this last thing about Edgy Boy. Ooh, the 8th.
Yeah, okay.
He's the best name. Anyway, I didn't like his ending. I mean, he didn't die. But in the fight between him and Kido, which lasted about an hour, by the way, coming to the very end of that fight, I mean, and Kido has him pinned down. We're not going to talk about the moaning.
Oh no.
Kido has him pinned down, and Edgy Boy is like shouting all these different things, and he's crying. And he's saying like he doesn't know what he is. He doesn't know if he is a monster or a person or both, because he could never be either, which is honestly a really interesting complex that he had. But in the one scene right where he's crying and doing all that and complaining about whatever he is, he doesn't know what he is and what he could be, because he was a failure at everything. The scene switches to something else. And then once we go back to Kido and Edgy Boy, which I think is a few minutes later in the same episode, Edgy Boy is completely fine. And I didn't really feel that resolution. And I think he comes to that because Kido, our number one resident edgelord, Kido, is saying something about how he struggled with trying to understand if the people or the bugs he was killing are still people or are they just bugs. And honestly, I never felt that struggle throughout the entirety. The only time that even became a bit of a thing was in the 5th episode in his backstory. But other than that, I never felt that problem. Anyway, so yeah, Kido's going on about that. And this somehow resolves Edgy Boy's problem about not knowing what he is.
Yeah. I mean, Kido isn't someone I would consider to give you good advice, but I mean that part was realistic, probably, but that act resolved his problems through hearing these words. Like, I mean, I felt like that didn't even have too much to do with Ark's struggle in the first place. Like, Ark was having was having a real existential crisis.
Yes.
And our edgelord here is going on a philosophical tirade about whether bugs are still human or not, and all this la-di-da-di-da. And I'm just like, great, that's good if you think so, but how's that supposed to help Ark? Or how did that help Ark?
I think somewhere in like the previous episodes of this conflict, Edgy Boy had said something along the lines of, I'm neither human nor am I bug, I'm a monster. But I thought this show was establishing that bugs essentially were monsters. So he was basically saying, I'm not human, I'm not a monster, I'm just a monster. And that didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm getting so many different vibes from this show. Like, this concept of being half human, half something else, and not knowing where to belong is basically the entire plot of Tokyo Ghoul. Mm-hmm. Only that Tokyo Ghoul did it 1,000 times better, because Tokyo Ghoul actually had a focus on that exact problem, while Cagaster doesn't know where to focus on. Like, you have this class full of anime, and Tokyo Ghoul is looking at the blackboard, while Cagaster is sitting there and like, oh my god, is that a butterfly?
So many different memes, all in one. Yeah. No, I get it. It's like Cagaster of the Insect Cage is trying to do everything and be everything, and it's just none of it, because it's not giving the proper time. And time is a big problem that many shows suffer with. They don't focus enough time into developing certain concepts, or they overdo it and they're staying on it way too long.
Yeah. Overstaying your welcome, Elise. This character was nothing but a plot device, and I hated her.
Yes. Illy.
Yeah, she was apparently, she was established and developed to be, in the end, Kido's love interest or something like that.
Miss me with that nonsense.
She was also, like, Ark's little sister, and she was another specimen that was, like, created or born for, like, the plans of the evil guy. So in the beginning, she was to control the insects so that they wouldn't attack humans, I think. And I mean, while this could have been done good. I mean, you already know where I'm going with this. They did absolutely nothing interesting with her.
And I completely agree. Because I don't even think I need to go into it. I completely agree. Her character is bland and it's boring. And
Yeah, I mean, it's the same problem as with Arc, but in a different version. Like with Arc, it was the struggle of being a failure, of not being accepted, and still having to bear all the responsibilities. While with Ellie, it was that she was only created and only meant to be a tool to be used. Her actual father her actual father didn't show any affection, didn't have any time for her, and she was like being rejected from her father. She couldn't see her mother, and the only one taking care of her was her foster father, Griffith. And it could have been like an emotional struggle that could have been done with her. Like she was without love from her actual parents, or she couldn't talk to her mother. Like there are so many unused possibilities with this character, and what they done with her instead of what I just said was make her an unlikable little child, has some time that gets some time in the early episodes, that is annoying to watch, doesn't have really good chemistry with the main character, with whom she spends basically the most time. I mean, she's just not fun to watch, and you don't get why you should care for her until the last 5 episodes.
yeah, exactly. The caring about her thing. So her dad, or as we're led to believe in the first episode, her quote unquote dad, which we know it to be Griffith, dies. And well, she's traumatized by that, yada yada. And apparently he told our main character, Kido, to take care of her and to take her to her mother, which they never do ever. They don't even try to do it in the first couple of episodes. Actually, they never try to do it. She just happens to get to her mother and he goes to save her or something. So he wasn't doing what he promised.
I mean, they show that they kind of searched for Tanya, but two things. First off, that wasn't even Kido, that was the restaurant keeper, the barkeeper, Miss Mario. And second off, why did they think that her mother would have been in '05? Only ever searched in '05, and then were like, oh, guess she's not here. Just stop here. We just stop.
Yeah, they should have looked further. But I'll be the one defending the show this one time. Maybe they assumed that Tanya was in '05 because one, it would have been easier to look there, but two, quote unquote, Ellie's father was heading in that direction, and they probably just thought he was going to '05, so Tanya was probably there. Maybe that's what they thought. I'll defend the characters this one time.
This one time.
This one time.
Yeah. That's fair.
So Ellie is boring and apparently important. And you know what I find a little interesting, but not really, is she doesn't remember anything from her time in the lab place or whatever. But we as the audience don't know this. So as far as we know, Griffith was actually her father. They're actually looking for her mother, who she can't remember, and we assume maybe it's because she just hasn't seen her in years, which is actually the truth. And we're never at any point led to believe that there is something missing in regards to her other than her mother. And then in the episode when she suddenly turns those two guys into bugs, it's just dropped on you, and she's like, oh my god, I remember something that I didn't know I was forgetting. And even though that's actually a realistic portrayal, she wouldn't know she was forgetting something. Shouldn't she have, like, probably throughout the episodes leading up to this, had certain flashbacks or certain feelings like, I feel like I know somebody, but I don't know who they are because I don't exactly remember them. And that wouldn't make sense though because she grew up on a farm, so she's like, I don't know these people. Is it just I'm having a dream?
Yeah, I mean, Eli, what's much more to say about her?
Nothing.
She was like an object that was just there to progress the story. But the difference between her and an inanimate object is that an inanimate object doesn't annoy the hell out of you. I mean, we're not in production or anything of that matter yet, but her voice acting, like the voice actor for that role, at least in the English dub and in the German one, because I watched it in German before, both of those either don't match the animation or just sound so awful.
Honestly, when I watched what turned out to be the backstory for Illy, her child voice is so annoying. It wasn't cute, it was annoying.
But on that note, Arc's child voice didn't sound like a child's one. It just sounded like Magic Teen already.
I know, the ones that are destined to become edgy boys never sound like children when they're children.
Yeah.
Okay, we can move on from Elle. Your opinion on Jin, who is the guy that was in the truck when they found Illy.
I mean, he didn't have too many appearances, and
He
that
didn't.
was probably why I liked him a bit more than the main characters. Like, for the parts we see him, he's actually kind of nice and enjoyable to watch.
Yeah.
There's not much to say about. He's not really there I mean, he's kind of important to the plot, but not too important.
I found him enjoyable, and that's just the end of it. Other characters to go. Miss Mario. Love Miss Mario. The end.
Yeah. Well, maybe a bit more. I mean, I cannot forgive her for shipping Kido and Ellie.
Oh yeah, that's an eternal sin.
She is so damn insistent, and especially in the earlier episodes, it's so damn confusing because she's like all over Ellie. She even has a fitting outfit, a waitress outfit for her, and that throws off the question either did she already have that, or how much time has progressed.
Exactly. Time is not very obvious in the show. That's why I just was not paying attention. Which, can you blame me?
And also, Miss Mario had, without questions, she had the best scene in the entire anime. I don't know which one it was. I think it was episode 9, where she jumps out from behind a cover, pulls out her minigun and shoots a tank. Scene was fully 2D, and like the rest of the anime is 3D, and this one scene is 2D, and it looked so fluent, it looked so good. The red points in her eyes that flamed up, everything about that animation was so goddamn gorgeous.
It was really, really good. And when we get into production, we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but it was good. I think all the 2D aspects of the show were really, really good.
Kasim.
Kasim.
Only around for 4 episodes.
Yep. I liked him. Wish they didn't just suddenly decide to make him more of a character at the end, but...
Yeah. He had one of the best lines. Like this one, Exterminator, are you dead? Oh, answer if you're dead.
I know!
This one line at the end of episode 3 for funniest in the entire anime. Second, he was pretty likable, even if he was a bit too shouty McShout in the first 2 episodes. He should have definitely had more screen time, and in my opinion, they didn't have to kill him off in episode 4. What they've done in episode 4 was give him a bunch of backstory to show that he has a conflicted past, like everybody in this anime apparently has. And then they just kill him off.
And even though I liked Kasim, and well, you liked Kasim, to somebody else where he would have most likely just ended up being an average character, because I mean there isn't much substance to him at this point in time. Killing him off felt like he just died because somebody needed to die. And they knew they couldn't just kill off a nameless character. They had to kill off somebody who they've at least partially established. And now Kasim is dead. He's dead. We'll amp up his character a little bit more. We'll give him some backstory. And then we'll kill him. So that way you can never say, well, we didn't have things to latch onto and invest in. We'll give you stuff you need to invest in the same episode we're gonna take him away from you. That was a death for death's reason. Oh yeah. That wasn't good.
Next on my list, I would have Franz.
Franz.
Yeah, I feel like they did a bit of what they did with Kasim, with Franz, with that white boy. I mean, he had a white lab coat.
Oh my gosh. Franz. His name is Franz. Say it properly.
Franz. Okay. I mean, he got he appeared in the earlier episodes with like within some seconds, and then they just gave him the backstory with Griffith and Ely and Arct and explained what his character was, and then later on they just killed him off. And call me unempathetic, but I just didn't care for his death at all, and they dragged it on for so long.
They did. Oh my god.
Dying for so many episodes.
I know. After collapsing, he's like, I can't go any further, and he's dead. They'd had like 3 different shots of him just taking his last breath. He took his last breath 3 times.
like, bro, I get it. You're dying.
I honestly, strange enough, I kind of liked Franz. At least I liked where he could have gone, because he was weird. He was weird. Maybe I'm just always a weird character kind of person, but he was strange. My problem with him, however, lies in how convoluted his backstory is. Like, his story before he meets Griffith, the one he was saying something about when his father died or something. I don't even know. I couldn't understand what was going on. I actively rewound the episode like a couple minutes to hear what they were saying again, and I still didn't understand what was going on. So something about his father getting eaten by a bug, and except his father wasn't the one who died that day, because his father's soul took over his body. So does that mean he's actually his father, and Franz died, and Franz is Franz's father in his body?
God, I don't even know what you're talking about. Honestly, like, his backstory with his father dying, and then him picking up Tanya, and her giving birth to... He picked up Tanya from a dead woman's corpse. Creepy.
A dead woman's corpse, wow. I would imagine the dead woman wouldn't be alive.
Oh god, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, no, continue. He picked up the body from the dead woman's corpse.
I mean, that's kind of a weird thing about him too, like, he fucked a woman that he picked up from a corpse. Like, he saw that child grow up, and then he got married and had 2 children with that woman. Like, I mean, to me that's a bit creepy.
Franz was creepy even before that. Okay, when I said I liked him, I don't mean like, ooh, this is a character I'm dead by, but I didn't dislike him to the sense that, I don't want to see his face. He was a complicated character, but not complicated in a good way, because he was just confusing. Everything about him was confusing.
Yeah. Can we go on to my probably most favorite character?
Griffith?
I mean, I know that he died in the first episode and that his only appearances are in the backstories, but like, he was the most likable, the most sympathetic. He cared for the children, even if they weren't his own. He was concerned for Tanya. He was concerned for Ellie. He took so much care of children that weren't his own. He made sure they had something to read. He tried his best to spend time with him, to spend time with his friends. I mean, he just seemed like an actual nice guy.
He was a great guy, you know? It's actually sad when you think back over the show and you think, oh, he dies in like the first episode because he was such a good guy.
Like, I was watching this backstory and I'm thinking to myself, oh my, this is actually my favorite character. Oh wait, he already died. This is the past.
Sad boy always. He was good. He was good. I liked how when there was the video that he recorded, he was like apologizing to Franz, I think it was. And it would have been interesting if we got to dive more into that angle of him making a decision that he thought was for the best, you know, taking Illy away to try and preserve them because, I mean, they're just children. And then Illy going on to end up turning those people, that man, into a bug. And imagine, like, if Illy kind of went and turned half of a village into bugs. And then Griffith is like, I literally just brought the bug infector out into the open and now everybody is susceptible to her infection, you know? And you could feel the guilt of him in the video, but it would have been interesting if that expanded a bit more. And I think there are 2 instances in which he points a gun at Illy, but he can't pull the trigger. So it's sad that we don't get to spend more time with this character in real time, dealing with what he thinks it was the wrong decision, but it's actually pretty A-okay, you know?
Yeah, you already said it, but I feel like this show should have not only focused, but maybe take another approach to the whole thing. Having watched this anime, I think that an anime about like Kido's backstory or about Griffith and Elise on backstory and all of that, if they did that instead, that could have been such an interesting topic. Like all of these moral aspects that are thrown in with like how far can you go with like protecting someone or protecting society, human society, and how far would you go for that, even if it means like killing siblings, killing your family, or watching your family die in front of you because of this bug disease. Like, that was shown at times. If they focused on like Griffith or like Kido's backstory, that could have been way more interesting.
It could have, and I think it would have been because there would have been more to dive into. And maybe I'm just biased and I like the more psychological aspects of things. But it would have felt a little bit more fulfilling than it just being, like I said earlier, there's that bad guy that they get to blame all their problems on because he's festering a bug colony or whatever.
Yeah. Willem Adham was his name.
Yes.
Was another odd thing about this anime, because like his motivation wasn't really all that clear. I mean, they made an attempt at explaining it, but it didn't come through properly. And in the end, when he died, when Kido shoots him, he falls down and he gets eaten by insects. Like, you feel nothing. You don't even feel accomplished or happy.
Nope.
Because you don't really know much about him other than he wants to use the queen, the insect queen, to create a new bug-safe society.
Yep. And to top all that off, they decided to give him a backstory in the last episode, seconds before he gets eaten alive. And maybe that's supposed to be a cruel reality kind of thing, but it doesn't really work because we've spent so little time with this character and so little time seeing him do other things for us to even really be affected. It just felt like they needed somebody to pin the blame on, so they designed a character and had him there.
Yeah, do you know these villains that are using extremes to get their way, to get everything their way, but in their core, like you can sense and you can see that there is righteousness and that they have a good goal and that you can understand why they think doing all that is necessary. Like, there are villains that do bad things for the right reason. Adham could have been one of them. Like, he was trying to make the world a better place, securing normal life, but two things. First off, he wasn't really developed as a character.
Nope.
He was just there to be evil. And second off, they don't show enough trouble with the cities. Like, the only ever trouble you see that the big cities have is when 07 got turned into an insect cage by Adham. And the Westgate tragedy in 05 that was explained in episode 4. Those didn't really do a good job establishing why exactly people that live in the cities need to be afraid of the Cagaster.
Yeah, other than that, they die.
I mean, with better border patrols, these cities seem to be like impervious to bug attacks because you never see a single bug except from episode 1 attack 05.
True.
I mean, you see the sand bug and the one in episode 1, but like 5 soldiers and an exterminator and a bunch of kids take care of that one, and the other one is just killed by an exterminator.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't, even though I think I subconsciously do feel the threat of the Cagaster, at the same time when I'm actively sitting and watching the show, it's just like, what's going on here? Where's the threat? And that may have been an attempt from the show creators to put focus on other things apart from the bugs, but because they never really went really far with any of those things, it just felt like nothing was going on, which is how I felt about the first couple of episodes. Nothing is going on.
They only ever insert the bugs into the wasteland when they're needed, because like in one of the last episodes they were evacuating 05 because of the military of Adham's forces getting closer, and there was no bug even trying to attack the people running away.
Oh yeah, true. I didn't even notice that. It didn't register. They were fine. I think what frustrates me about Adam is that he could have been a great villain. I like sympathetic villains. I like the idea that he had to, well, he didn't have to, but I like the idea that he killed his son and therefore he's had that baggage on his mind as he's striving for a perfect world. And, it shows that he was willing to sacrifice what was necessary, so now everybody else better be willing as well, because he's already took the first couple of steps. And this could have all been really interesting, but none of that is ever really a factor until the very last episode, seconds before he dies.
Besides that, I don't really have any important characters anymore to talk about. Like, I wrote down Lizzie because like she adds something to Kasim's character right before he dies. She's basically only a plot tool, a plot device, make you feel for Kasim. She has some trauma related to Kasim. She's only there to make Kasim a better character in the episodes right before he dies.
Yeah.
So she's not really that important. Tanya's
a nothing character. There's literally nothing to say about her.
Yeah, she just like Lizzie to Kasim, Tanya is basically only a plot device for the relation of Franz, Griffith, Ark, and Elite. Like Tanya is like a key point to all of them, of all of their feelings and all of the stories. She isn't anything for herself other than the insect queen.
True. She doesn't even really have a personality either.
The only character that I wrote down other than that is Lazarus.
Oh yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, he was an interesting character, and his backstory that was established inside of the backstory of Kido was somewhat interesting. But I mean, what do you expect? It's not really built on, or like, it doesn't really affect anything except for like, Kikido's worldview, despite it. His scenes are probably one of most like part of the best ones, just because he's somewhat of a sympathetic character. He plays off good with army general like Petrov, I think was his name.
Yeah, it was Petrov.
Yeah, and like just with Kasim, they gave him a past. They made it all sad. He lost his family because like God didn't save him and stuff, and now he's disappointed in God. Woo.
Ooh.
And when he transforms into a bug, then like, oh my god, trauma, tension, Kido runs away, how sad. Now we understand this edgelord.
Yeah. Lazarus is another example of wasted potential, but also a sign that Netflix was trying, because they did try to make him complicated and have like all these complexities to him, but they never really go too far with anything. They just keep it very, very, very basic. They do the very bare minimum required to at least slightly establish these aspects of him. So the thing with God didn't save them, so he's disappointed in God, and from that point on he kind of strived to become his own god in a sense. He was disappointed with everybody else around him, and he was angry at the world, he was angry at himself, he was angry at the bugs, everything. He was just angry, very angry man. And that's just it, he was just a really angry man. Religion no longer matters to him, but not in the sense that he abandoned it. He kind of became his own religion in a sense, but they don't go too far with that.
I think they tried to do that a bit with Kido, who's kind of following his philosophy, keeping him alive, because like Kido himself said that he wanted to keep Lazarus alive as a god for himself. So they kind of did do something with the idea, and like of Lazarus abandoning God and trying to become his own. Like they clearly tried, but it never really pays off in any way that matters to the overarching story.
Yeah, I agree. So Lazarus was enjoyable, definitely. He was one of the more enjoyable characters to watch, at least in my opinion, in his one appearance.
The most enjoyable characters in this series are the ones that don't get too much screen time.
Which is sad, but true. Maybe because it's less obvious that they're being underutilized if they're not in the actual screen, because then it's just like, okay, maybe they're off doing something else while we sit down here and watch the main characters actually do nothing.
Except for Lazarus and Griffith, because we're both dead.
Wow, edgy. Yeah. There are like other characters that we don't have to talk about because they barely make an impact. So I guess we can move on to production now, if you want to.
Yeah, well, I don't really want to, because the production value is horrible.
Yeah, and there isn't much to say. This will probably be the shortest thing that we speak of. The production is bad.
Yeah.
The end. It's bad. Roll credits. It's done.
The entire animation is my problem with the animation because it's 3D and it's so bad. Like it's not even so bad it's good, it's just bad.
Yeah, true. It doesn't get quite that. The character models themselves aren't atrocious. It's just the animation itself. And of course, I am no animation expert. I understand that it's a really difficult thing to do. But Netflix is like a multi-million-dollar company or something like that. Right? They've got big bucks to produce really good things. Why does the animation look like stop motion, but nobody took a class in it and was just looking at all the other videos and trying to emulate that?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing I don't get about with anime because Netflix has shown on several occasions that they can do good animations, even good 3D animations. And I'm just thinking that this one was on the specific animators. So, like, what were they trying to accomplish? I get a strong vibe, like, from the newer version of Berserk, because in that anime they also tried to mix 2D and 3D, but a lot more. And it looked the same way, like, the same level of atrociousness. Because, like, when you have 3D and 2D mixed, you're gonna need to have like 2D as a standard, because 3D as a standard in a world doesn't work if you're going to implement 2D elements.
Exactly. The combination of 2D and 3D, at least in this anime from what I've seen, it just did not work. Because some characters were just like fully 2D. There was that paranoid guy in the second episode. There was some general guy in the later episodes. These people just fully 2D. And they're standing right next to the 3D characters. And it's just off. Even when they just have the fully 2D scenes transitioning to the 3D scenes, it looks bad because you're noticing all the detail in this one character. And it doesn't look good because it's so noticeable.
I mean, it's like when when games have cutscenes and then the cutscenes end and go into gameplay. It's exactly this. Like the 2D animation looks so good. It's so detailed at points, so flowing when it's moving, and then you have this 3D that's just so stiff, inanimate. When they're moving, it's just like they're being pushed. It's not they're not moving on their own, and you can see that.
Yeah, it's bad. It's noticeably bad. I'll admit that I got accustomed to it after the first two episodes. It was fine for me, but like going into the first episode, it was ugh. And even sometimes after the second episode, after I've gotten accustomed to animation, it was still noticeably bad. Because when these characters aren't moving, they aren't moving at all. They're like statues. They're just standing there, frozen. And it's so weird.
Worst thing about it is that once they show you like the 2D models, the 2D animations, like in the fifth episode, you see a short image of Petrov in a church, and where he's all wounded and patched up, and you can see like some marks across his face, and he looks like a war-torn soldier in that shot. But the other times you see him, I mean, of course he's not going to look the exact same, but he looks like a plastic figurine that has been kept in a safe lock for the last 20 years.
Yeah, he's too clean, man. He's too clean. And the voice acting for some of these characters, ugh. Again, I'm not much of a person to complain or critique these kinds of things, but it was particularly bad here. Like, Lizzie, her voice actress, I'm sorry to say, did not do a very good job the first couple of episodes that Lizzie was in. In the later episodes, she was really good, and it was great, but the line delivery on some of those earlier ones were, oh gosh, yikes.
Actors and their performances, I probably have to say that like Miss Mario had a
pretty nice voice. Griffith was enjoyable. Lazarus, Kido as well, even though it didn't distract from the fact that I couldn't bear him throughout the first half of the anime. But like the rest, either just added on top of how much I disliked the character, or couldn't do enough to save the character in itself. Like, I mean, Art, France, and all of that, like, I didn't have particular problems with how their voice acting was done and implemented, but, like, you can't expect that to cover up for the giant hole that are their personalities.
Exactly. That's a good way to describe it. A giant hole. Okay, just a quick thing. Your final statements on Cagaster of an Insect Cage.
So, my last statement, like, you can clearly see that the producers were trying with this series. They had a really interesting concept, disease turning people into bugs, and exactly that was what got me hooked in at first.
Same.
But then they ruined it, not only with the animation, that it's bad in itself, but more so with the story. Like, the story was kind of the biggest problem that I had with the entire anime. It just felt like it didn't know what it wanted, and the characters certainly didn't help, because the ones that were actually good didn't have enough screen time, were dead, were killed off way too early, or didn't appear like for 8 episodes. And if you take what the anime offers you, it's so apparent that they clearly didn't know what to do. The story had no focus. The animation was bad. The characters, you could bear them at best, and at the worst, you wanted them to die in an instant. Like, I mean, Netflix and the producers of this anime surely were trying, and it wasn't the worst anime I have ever seen.
I agree.
But by God, it was a bad one at that.
Yeah, I'd say I completely agree. So for the people who made this anime, it's not the worst thing in the world, and at the very least, we can all see that there was an effort put into the show. As some effort was placed there, and I think in all regards that deserves some praise, because some things just, they don't have any passion in them, or at least they don't feel like they have any passion. Some shows just don't feel like they have any general direction, and too much passion, and so it's just all over the place. And I think Cagaster, the Insect Cage, falls more into the latter. There was definitely something was trying to be done there, and I could appreciate the effort in that regard, but they probably should not have gone with the first draft of the story and not wasted their potential.